Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I'm going to do my June reading wrap up. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack. If you're not new, welcome back to the channel. So May was a great reading month for me. I read 12 books, or I finished 12 books, and the first ones I'm going to start with, I've read quite a lot of middle grade as well, and I do have review videos either out for them or coming out for them, so I won't spend too long on the middle grade, and I won't spend too long on these ones I'm about to talk about either, because these are my Terry Pratchett rereads. So I'm rereading Terry Pratchett at the moment because I've got to finish the Discworld series, and finally, because I've been putting it off since he passed away 6 years ago, and I feel like I've got such an emotional connection to the Discworld books. So I've been reading them since I was a teenager. I absolutely love them. They're kind of my happy place. So I was really not prepared to be there'd be no more Discworld books coming out. So I've been rereading them, and it's been quite interesting actually, because I've always all the books that I have read of the Discworld, I've got some that I love more than others, but I've always said that I really love and enjoy all of them, and I do to an extent. But I kind of didn't enjoy one as much as I remember enjoying it before. It wasn't this one. This was the first one that I finished in June, which is Night Watch, which is one of the City Watch Guards sequence about Sam Vimes. I'm not going to go into Discworld too much. If you've never read Discworld, I've got a video on it. You can check it out on my channel, where to start with Discworld. But yeah, this one, Night Watch, is actually probably, I've always loved Guards, but I think Night Watch might even be a better book. Yeah, I think it might be, and I really loved it. There's a bit of time travel in it, and it's actually a really emotional book. I thought it was quite emotional, but well worth a read. Other things that I read were Masquerade, which is the fifth or sixth Witches book, and Carpe Juggling, which is the last Witches book. But yeah, I kind of can see some, I don't know, not flaws in them as such, but they're not as wonderful as they were the first time I read them. These particular two. So I'm going to go through the middle grade that I read quite quickly, because I have got reviews of them. The very first one I read, I did a sort of Pride recommendation for, because I finished it at the beginning of June, which coincided with Pride. It was just coincidental, but a nice coincidence. And it's Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow by Benjamin Dean. It's all about a boy called Archie who finds out that his dad is gay, and he ends up going on an adventure to Pride in London. Lots of really good educational stuff in here about Pride and its history, and about what it means, what LGBT stands for, and what those terms mean, what lesbian means, what gay means. And yeah, I just thought it was a really sweet book. It is really heartwarming, and drag queens save the day in it, which, you know, perfect. How to Be Me by Kath Howe is a book about a boy called Lucas, who is a very rich boy but a very lonely boy, and his mum has passed away a few years before. Dad doesn't really understand him, and Dad's getting remarried, and Lucas is an introvert, and he just likes to stay at home with his cats and play his piano, and his dad makes him go to a drama club, like his worst nightmare, would be my worst nightmare as well. And he ends up meeting some friends and finally coming to terms with his grief and his dad's grief, and it's a really lovely book. When I first started it, I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy it, but it finished up really nicely and a little bit emotional. Then I read Space Oddity by Christopher Edge. Christopher Edge, I've never read any of his stuff before, but this is a Chicken House book, and I have a video coming out all about Chicken House Books, who are a very small publisher in the UK. They are distributed worldwide. I think they've got a deal with Simon & Schuster, but they are an independent, small publisher in the UK. They just do the most fabulous books, so I've done a video about them, which will be coming out soon, and I've also done an individual review for Space Oddity, which will come out. But it's a very sweet middle grade sci-fi, and yeah, it's all about a boy called, it's all boys actually, I've just realised. Lots of boys. Oh, the last one isn't about a boy, but this is about a boy called, I can't remember his name, Jake. And Jake, he's embarrassed about his dad, and his dad and him have been falling out, so his dad takes him on this camping trip, and at the campsite, it's supposed to be a site where UFOs have landed before, and UFOs make an appearance again. I won't say any more than that because spoilers, but Space Oddity is called Space Oddity because there are references to David Bowie in it, so I couldn't resist picking it up because, I don't know if you know, but I am quite a huge Bowie fan. I might do a video on some of my David Bowie books actually. But anyway, yeah, so this was really sweet, very nice book. Nothing hugely special, but I think kids would love it. It's very funny in places as well. This last one was perhaps my favourite middle grade read. I absolutely loved it. Oh, got some tabs in it as well of things I wanted to talk about. But it's called, it's the first book of the Pages & Co series, and I can't believe I haven't picked this series up before now. So it's the first book is called Tilly and the Book Wanderers, and it's all about a girl called Tilly Pages who lives in her grandparents' bookshop called Pages & Co. Need I say more? I am going to do a video on it, so I'm not going to rant on about it for too long, but it's just so sweet. It's like they've gone inside my head and made all the thoughts that I've ever had into a book. So yeah, she lives in a bookshop and she goes wandering in and out of books and meets characters like Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables and Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And yeah, even Lizzie Bennet makes an appearance. Just so good. If you like reading middle grade, I can recommend this. If you're an adult who likes reading middle grade, I did wonder if children who haven't read the books that are referenced in here would enjoy it. That did strike me a little bit, but they're a very popular series, so it's a nice adventure, but it's the first in a series, and yeah, I'm definitely going to be getting the rest of them. It's like my dream, live in a bookshop and go wandering into books with book characters. Perfect. The next two books were YA. These, I'm not doing them in the order I read them in, I just thought I'd clump them together into sort of middle grade, YA, etc. I don't know what order they're going to be in when I actually edit the video, but YA. I just finished this one and I will do a video on this because this deserves to be talked about at length. Felix Ever After by Case and Callender is about a young trans man, he's 17, called Felix Love. And Felix he's called Love but has never been in love. And I started reading this book initially thinking I'm going to love this book. And then I started reading it, and what happens is someone posts pictures of Felix before he transitioned and posts his dead name all over the lobby in their school, and it starts off this revenge campaign by Felix. And because of the revenge vibes and the sort of behaviour, I wasn't initially into it, because Felix decides he's going to find out who it is, but in his head he thinks he knows who it is, so he starts catfishing this person by setting up a fake Instagram account, making friends with them because he wants them to reveal their deep dark secrets so he can tell everybody what they are. And I just found that to me is just, I know he's a teenager, it's distasteful, but rest assured, lessons are learned, things happen, and by the end of it I just couldn't put it down. I really liked this book so much. I want to say if I love it, I'm still percolating on it, but yeah, it's made a big impact on me. So yeah, I think I'm going to do, like I said, I'm going to do a longer video on it because there are so many deep themes in it, lots of themes. Identity is a huge theme. Felix is still struggling with his identity and then wondering whether he should, because he's he's announced he's a trans man, and then he's still struggling to wonder what he is. We'll do a video on Felix Ever After, so I'm not going to talk about it too much more, but just to say it's really, really good. The other YA book I read was a recommendation from Ariel from Reading and Whatnot, and it is a lot of Pride Month. I did quite a lot of reading of queer authors in Pride Month, and it was just wonderful. So yeah, Benjamin Dean, Felix Ever After, Nen and the Lonely Fisherman. If you haven't seen my video of that, I don't put my picture books in my wrap-ups, but I did do a picture book review. Beautiful book. And Felix Ever After. And the other one was a YA graphic novel called On a Sunbeam, which is completely free online. I read it. I would like to buy a copy of it at some point because it was just stunning and I loved it. And the other YA book I read was a graphic novel, and it's called On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. And I saw this first on Ariel's channel, Reading and Whatnot, and I was just like captivated when she showed the graphics and everything else. I haven't read enough graphic novels in my life, so if you've got any recommendations, please pop them in the comments below. But On a Sunbeam, I was just so joyous. You have to read it. It gave me vibes of, if you've ever read Becky Chambers' science fiction Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which I can only term as cozy science fiction. I don't know how else to term it. Like, I don't know if I've made that up or if I've heard it somewhere. And On a Sunbeam is the same, and it's about a crew of engineers who basically they go out on these jobs that they're contracted to. They're construction workers, and they go out on these jobs in space, and they find these floating wrecks of planets, of places that have been inhabited, and they fix them up, and they're sent to fix them up. And they're a crew of women primarily, but one non-binary character as well. And as I read through the book, I discovered, reading through the book, there's no men, absolutely no men in this book. And it's just a lovely, lovely story of family, found family and love, and all set against a backdrop of space and these amazing abandoned ruins in space of all these colonies, and just, yeah, and there's a backstory, there's a dual timeline going on. The ship is called, I think the ship is called the Sunbeam, and it's crewed by a captain and a pilot, and there are like 2 other crew members on board, and they're joined by a new crew member at the start, a girl, it's like she's 17, 18, 19, I can't remember her age, but she joins the crew, and she's got a bit of a backstory to her, and we find out what the backstory is as we go forward. But I just loved it. I loved the graphic art style, I loved the heartwarmingness. I don't know how else to put it, but read it. It was just such a lovely, lovely book. And then when I went to, you can read it online. I'll put the link in the description box below of where you can read it online. And when I went to Tilly Walden's website to have a little look about her and about everything, she said, yeah, I wanted to make, I don't know anything about space, I don't know anything about sci-fi, but I just had it in my head to write this book. And she didn't want, and she also purposely didn't put any men in. She said, did you notice? I was like, yes, I did notice. I noticed there were no men in the book. So yeah, it's a really interesting book, and I hope there are more, because I would definitely read them. The next book I read, I actually listened to on Audible. It wasn't Audible, it was on Libby, but it was an audiobook, and it was The Salt Path by Raina Wynn. Now, I had seen this book in bookshops so many times and been struck by this gorgeous cover, and I'd never actually picked up and looked at the blurb and knew what it was about. But it's a memoir, and I found out, I was looking at a friend's Instagram page, and they talked about it at Nikki Maund, who I'll link in the description box, and she's got some great recommendations. She's made me spend far too much money, but this one I got on Libby on the library app, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful memoir. It's about Raina and her husband Moth, and in their 50s, in about the early sort of 2012, maybe 2013, I think it's when this happened to them, they lost absolutely everything they lost their farm, they lost all their property, their children had gone off to university, and they were left homeless because of some bad investment decisions based on some advice from a friend, and they lost absolutely everything that they worked for 30 odd years. And they're in their 50s, they're not that far off retirement, so they find themselves homeless. And then to top things off and make matters worse, Moth is diagnosed with a condition which I can't remember the name of, but it's quite a rare neurological condition, very deteriorative, and he's in a lot of pain, and he's just told that he's going to wither away and eventually choke to death in about 6 to 8 years. So that's like all happens in the space of a couple of weeks, this news and them losing their home. So they decide, after they're trying to find out whether they can get a council house, where they can do all these things in the UK, get some help, and it's just very, very difficult. So instead of relying on the goodwill of their friends and family and couch surfing, they decide to pack everything up they get a tent, they buy a cheap one on eBay, they get some backpacks, and they decide they're going to spend the summer months, because it's the summer, walking the southwest coastal path in the UK, which is about a 600-mile path around Cornwall and Devon. And basically they're homeless, so they become these hiking homeless, as someone calls them. And it's a real eye-opening read, and she gives lots of information about the homeless figures in the UK, which are really poor records. Sometimes they'll count the number of homeless people on one night they happen to see in a certain part of town, and they say that's how many people are homeless in that town. And it's like, actually that's far less than the, you know, something like 280,000 households who claim to be homeless. That's households, that's not people who claim to have no fixed permanent address in the UK. And it's just devastating. And she says when people think of homeless people, they think of rough sleepers, and they think that people have been made homeless because they've got an addiction or they've got a problem. And 9 times out of 10, the addiction is caused by the homelessness. And the laws against loitering, against everything else, you know, God help anybody who ends up homeless. That's all I can say after reading this book. It's not like the first time I've ever contemplated what it means for people in this country to be homeless, but it's a real eye-opening read. And then they discover on their walk, because Cornwall and Devon, you know, if you're not from the UK, you might not be familiar, but such beautiful parts of the country, and that loads of people with lots of money buy second homes there. And because they buy second homes there, the people who've been resident there for generations, who are farming people or fishermen or whatever, they get priced out of their own community. And they discover and they come across a community of farm workers who just live in the forest outside because they can't afford, they need to work on the farms, they need to, you know, the work that they do, they can't get anywhere else, but they can't afford to live in the houses in the area, so they live off the land, they live in the forest. So yeah, it was a real eye-opener. I really recommend that book. Really, really eye-opening, very emotional. I actually missed them both when it was done. The one thing I didn't enjoy though was the audiobook narrator, who was very good, just kept mispronouncing her A's, which was, so she would say plastic instead of plastic, and she would say bandana instead of bandana, and that kind of got to me a little bit. But other than that, the audiobook narration was very good. And one of my 5-star reads this year, Where the Crawdads Sing. What a beautiful, beautiful book. I'm very late to the party on it, and it is a really well-known book now. It's set in North Carolina in the 1950s and 1960s, and it's all about a girl who grows up in the marshes because she's abandoned by her family, and she grows up, pretty much raises herself, and she's known as the Marsh Girl. A crime is committed in the local community, someone dies, and the book flits back between her growing up and how she's had to take care of herself and how she's grown up alone, to the present time at that point, which is the 60s, where a local sort of superstar high school footballer guy who everyone loves in the community has been found dead. So yeah, it's a crime novel, but I just loved it. I think the author is someone who understands or is a scientist of some kind, or an expert, a nature expert, but the descriptions of the animals and the marsh and I just thought it was beautiful. I really, really, really loved this book, and I haven't got my copy of it because I immediately lent it to a friend because I was like, oh my gosh, why haven't we read this book before? But it is being made into a film, and I'm sure there are better reviews out there than the waffle I'm giving now, which is why I need to start annotating so I can record my thoughts a bit more coherently when I start doing reviews like this to camera. But yes, read Where the Crawdads Sing. If you haven't read it and you've been seeing it and you're going, everyone's reading that, which I did a little bit, there is a reason. It is very, very good. Someone said to me it gave them To Kill a Mockingbird vibes. Yes, it did for me as well, actually. Small community and people who are marginalised being blamed for things that are not their fault necessarily, and being accused of crimes because they just happen to be the wrong type of person. Yes, so yeah, I get that when someone said it has To Kill a Mockingbird vibes, definitely. But yeah, beautiful. I actually cried at the end. I haven't cried at a book in a while, so really enjoyed it. The last thing I finished, and it was the last thing I finished, it was something I've been reading for a while. James Joyce, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Did this as part of a buddy read, or as a group read on Instagram, which has kind of fizzled out a little bit. I thought there'd be a lot more discussion in the group, but there hasn't been really. It's been led by someone who really understands and knows James Joyce's work. And I've always wanted to read James Joyce because I am Irish, and well, I don't sound it, but I am. Both my parents are Irish, and I've always wanted to read James Joyce. And I thought I'd start with a portrait of the artist as a young man because short. I didn't want to leap into Ulysses, but I've always been frightened of reading his work because you just hear it's so difficult. And yeah, it turns out James Joyce is not for me. I did read the whole thing. I really enjoyed the start of the book. I enjoyed the sort of themes of Irish nationalism and his resistance to it in the book, the political discussions that were had in the book. I really enjoyed those. I really enjoyed his time when he was younger, when he goes off to boarding school, all of those parts I actually really enjoyed. But then when it got to the bits where he's at university in Dublin and he goes on a retreat and it became very religious, and he's grappling, because the whole premise of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is James Joyce, it's semi-autobiographical, and him as a young man grappling with his ideas of art and beauty is discussed a lot. What beauty is, and what makes something beautiful, what makes something art. That's discussed a lot which was quite interesting at the end. But I really didn't enjoy the religious sections where he's a young man, so he starts visiting sex workers, and he's just, he's hooked. But then he goes on retreat with a Catholic retreat, when you go away with the priest and you spend the whole weekend in a paroxysm of guilt, which I have done being Catholic, or being raised Catholic. I'm not really religious anymore. So when I read through this pages and pages of talk about hell and damnation, which does go on for pages and pages and pages, it just put me off the rest of the book. Even though, and then he goes on, becomes this kind of religious zealot because he's afraid, because he's been, having sex, that he's going to go to hell, that he's treated his body abominably, and he just goes completely really hardline religious. Then he goes completely the other way. So it's an interesting book. I am glad I've read it, but I don't really enjoy this sort of indulgent navel gazing, which is why I kind of felt like it was. I can appreciate the writing. I can appreciate the prose. A lot. He's sort of when he's growing up, his interest in language and words is very apparent in the book. And I did like some of the talk, the philosophical debates that he has with his university pals. But yeah, James Joyce, I wasn't interested. I really wasn't that bothered. And by the end of the book, I just wanted it to be finished and done. But I'd normally DNF books, but it's so short and it is such a canonical, classic book that I felt I didn't want to say, yeah, I DNF'd it. Because I thought maybe it did pick up, because I enjoyed the start of the book. I think, it's just too indulgent for me. And just, if you like sort of constant streams of consciousness about lofty themes and ideas and ideals, then read it. I did find his talk about Ireland really interesting. In fact, there were a couple of quotes about it. Yeah, so for instance, when he's contemplating all the stuff he's done with these sex workers and he's getting embarrassed about it, he says, his face was burning with shame. Had it been any terrible crime but that one sin, had it been murder, he'd rather have been, he's more embarrassed about confessing that he's been having sex than if he had murdered someone. This is what I took from it anyway. Little fiery flakes fell and touched him at all points. Shameful thoughts, shameful words, shameful acts. Shame covered him wholly like fine glowing ashes falling continually. To say it in words, his soul, stifling and helpless, would cease to be. The writing's beautiful. However, there's just the content. So he's constantly questioning his Irishness, or he's being questioned about his Irishness. And he says some really interesting quotes. So he says, "My ancestors threw off their language and took another," Stephen said. "They allowed a handful of foreigners to subject them. Do you fancy I'm going to pay in my own life and person debts they made? What for?" So he's being sort of asked, about the cause. And I mean, they don't put it in that way, but they're talking about Irish nationalism and whether he believes in, in it and all those kinds of things, and he's going to fight for Ireland, etc. Those aren't the exact words, but that's kind of the gist of it, and that's his response. Like, why am I having to fight and pay debts that my ancestors made because they let a handful of foreigners subject them, which I thought was pretty good writing. And then he also says here, a man's country comes first, Ireland. Oh, he doesn't say this. So his friend's talking to him and he says, a man's country comes first, Ireland first, Stevie. You can be a poet or mystic after. Do you know what Ireland is? Asked Stephen with cold violence. Ireland is the old sow that eats her farrow. Woo! So Stephen is James Joyce's alter ego, Stephen Dedalus. Yeah, interesting. Lots of thoughts about what I've read, but I do want to read Dubliners. I've heard that's really good. Is it The Dubliners or Dubliners the short story collection? And I will read that at some point. Not for some time, I might add, but I finished it. I did it. I can now say I have read James Joyce. It's not why I did it. I didn't do it to say I'd read James Joyce. I did it because I thought I might really like James Joyce. I might get a lot out of it. And I did get stuff out of it, but I didn't get enjoyment out of it. So there, done with that. I hope this video isn't too long. I feel like I might have rambled on for quite some time, but if you did like this, if you liked my rambling nonsense and you like more rambling nonsense, please consider subscribing. Please consider clicking like and ringing the notification bell. And if you've read any of these books, or if you would like to read any of them, please leave a comment in the description box below and let me know how your reading month was. Was June a good month for you? I know July for me is going to be full of Jane Austen, so hopefully I'll have lots of good things to report on that. But if you liked it, like I said, come back soon and I'll see you again. Bye.